Hello, this is Ruth Kime, and welcome back to phase 3 of the end of the age chronology through Matthew 24. Also, remember there are parallel passages in Mark 13 and Luke 21. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Matthew 24, verse 29 is where we're going to pick up. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not shed its light. The stars will fall from the sky. Okay, so let's fill in our blanks. The sun is darkened. Moon will not shed its light. The stars fall from the sky. Okay, now I'm actually going to propose a slight delay here, and I could be wrong about this. This is just something I'm going to propose being here, and I'm going to show you why I think that. And again, I could be wrong on this. Okay, so if you would turn with me to 1 Corinthians 15:51. And 52. So I'm going to start reading. Listen, I am telling you a mystery. Remember that word mystery. We will not all fall asleep, but we will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. Remember, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we will be changed. This is a very famous rapture passage. So I am going to take you now to the last trumpet, because it just said at the last trumpet. So let's go to Revelation and go to the last trumpet. So Revelation 10:4. Okay. And when the seven thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the seven thunders. Seal up what the seven thunders said, and do not write it down. So John is sitting here. He has seen something called the seven thunders, but he's not allowed to write it down. And so we don't know what it is. Then let's skip down to verse 6, the very end of verse 6. I'm going to pick up where the colon is. There will no longer be a delay, but in the days when the seventh angel will blow his trumpet, remember it's a trumpet, and this is right before the last trumpet. He's referring to the last trumpet that's about to be blown. Then the mystery, remember that word mystery, of God will be completed as he announced to his servants, the prophets. So it's something that has been said previously. It's a mystery that's been previously talked about, and now the mystery is complete. So I would propose that this is where the rapture takes place. And I would say that verse 4 is possibly describing the delay, because it says in verse 6, at the end of verse 6, there will no longer be a delay. So I'm not sure what those seven thunders are or how long that they take, but now I'm going to also show it to you in the book of James. I want you to turn to James. Chapter 5, James chapter 5 and verse 7. I'm going to start reading. Therefore, brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for waits for the precious fruit of the earth, and is patient until he receives the early and latter rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, because the Lord's coming is near. So remember this, the Lord's coming is near. Brothers and sisters, do not complain about one another, so that you will not be judged. Look, the judge stands at the door. Then he goes on to talk about Job and how Job also needed to have patience. Okay, and was rewarded for having patience. So we see that when Jesus's return is near, in fact, when he's at the door, it actually means a specific thing. So let's go back to Luke 21. Remember, I'm trying to propose this idea of a little delay of time. So Luke 21, and I'm going to start with verse 25 just for context. Then there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and there will be anguish on the earth among the nations, bewilderment at the roaring of the sea and the waves. The people will faint from fear and expectation of the things that are coming on the world, because the powers of the heavens will be shaken. They will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Verse 28. But when these things begin to take place, so at the beginning of this description, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is near. Specifically, it's not here, but it's near. Okay, so near at the door. Okay, so now let's go back to Matthew 24, and I'm going to show it to you here. Matthew 24, verse 32. Listen, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things occur, recognize that he is near at the door. So he's saying near, but he's not saying here, not quite yet. Verse 34, truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things take place. I think that this is a reassurance to the believers during this delay, because if you can imagine, all these things have happened. You've gone through the birth pains, the great tribulation, and you've made it to this time frame. You see the sun, moon, and stars do their thing, and you're thinking, okay, it's supposed to meet immediate rapture, but then there's this little delay. I'm not sure how short it is, but I think this is actually a reassurance that, remember, the generation that sees the birth pangs and the tribulation is going to see it all. So it's going to happen. And then he gives them a second reassurance in verse 35. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So it's like he's reassuring them that he is going to keep his word. God is going to keep his promise. He's going to come. Okay, so this is, a proposal that I have about the delay. Now I'm going to show you yet again Matthew 24, verses 45 through 51. If you want to read that later, there's a little section that talks about a wicked person who sees that the groom is delayed in verse 28. But if that wicked servant says in his heart, my master is delayed, so there's this delay again, and then he goes back to wickedness and beating his servants. Then if you come to the parable of the virgins, once again, you see that the virgins are saying in verse 4, but verse 5, when the groom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Okay, so there keeps being this idea that the groom is delayed, and we know that we are the bride and that Jesus is coming for his bride, the church. So when the groom is delayed, don't be alarmed. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back to our fourth point, which is the heavens and earth are shaken. So point 4 in your fill in the blank is heaven and earth is shaken. And I'm going to pick up and start reading at the end of verse 29. And the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Verse 30. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And then all the people of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Well, we know from other rapture passages that Jesus is coming in the clouds when he comes for the rapture and for the day of the Lord, both of those. Okay. Coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Verse 31, he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet. We as Christians also know that all the rapture passages talk about the trumpet, and specifically the last trumpet. And they will gather his elect from the four winds of the earth, from one end of the sky to the other. So there we have the rapture. I believe that's the rapture right there. So let's go for number 5. In the book of Luke, we read it just a little bit ago, that the sea and waves will roar. Also in Luke, people faint from fear. Number 7, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And we learned from the tribulation time, remember that was the flashes of, as the lightning flashes from the east as far as to the west. So it's completely gone dark, sun, moon, and stars, and then the lightning flashes. Okay. All right, number 8, the world mourns. Number 9, the world sees Jesus coming on the clouds. And now we're actually going to go to Luke 21 to get a little more detail about that. The different parallel passages about this particular time frame give different details. So if you turn to Luke 21, verse 34 is where we're going to pick up. Be on your guard, so that your minds are not dulled from carousing, drunkenness, and the worries of life, or that day will come on you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come on all who live on the face of the whole earth. Verse 36. But be alert at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. So we're going to look real quick at Revelation, just to recap what the response of the unbelievers is going to be. Revelation 6, and we're going to pick up at verse 12. All right. Then I saw him open the 7th seal. A violent earthquake occurred, and the sun turned black like sackcloth made of hair. The entire moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its unripe figs when shaken by a high wind. Verse 14. Then the sky was split apart like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved from its place. And the kings of the earth and the nobles and generals, the rich and powerful, and every slave and free person, they're going to do one of 3 things, okay? They hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the rocks, and they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne. So that's suicide. What are they wanting to hide from? They're wanting to hide from the Lamb, okay? So fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Verse 17, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Now remember how it said that we, the believers, are supposed to stand before the Son of Man, okay? And to pray that you'll be able to escape these things. It said that in Matthew 24. What we're escaping is the wrath of God, and we do that by standing before the Son of Man. So we want to then look at your blanks, and it says the world's response is to hide in the caves, and then to tell the mountains to fall on them and the rocks. What it is they see that the wrath of God is coming, and they would rather commit suicide and go to hell than stay on earth, have the wrath of God, and then later go to the lake of fire. They are so fearful of the coming wrath of God. So this is the start of the wrath of God. It's going to be here at this time, and they seem to actually know it. All right, so then the Christian response in your fill in the blank is to stand before the Son of Man. So when the rest of the world is running and hiding, we stand, and that is when the angels gather the elect, aka the rapture. And that's number 10 in your fill in the blank. The angels gather the elect from the 4 winds of the earth. Okay. All right, so if you remember in our study, in each of the 3 phases of the end times, there was a a worldly response and there was a Christian response. And this is the one for this particular time, and that is to stand before the Son of Man. Also in the prophets, in other places all over the prophets, it also talks about this, who will be able to escape, who will be able to stand. And, you know, during that particular time frame, it'll talk about the day of the Lord and then talk about that. So it is reiterated over and over throughout Scripture. So, okay, so that actually concludes the end of our third phase of the end of the age, according to Matthew 24 and the other Gospels. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put those below, and I will try to do further studies in order to answer your questions. Thank you very much for listening.